Hello and welcome to everybody who is joining us this evening for our second FAFSA event. This is the American Indian College Fund. We are excited to talk more in depth about the FAFSA with you today. We would like to welcome all of our attendees to log into Mentimeter. You can log in on a cell phone, or if you have a laptop or tablet, you can log in those ways as well. It's www.menti.com. The code to join is 55971128. I will drop that code in the chat for everybody who is joining us. Right here. Sorry about that. Took a moment for it to go through. And there is our code. It's www.menti.com 55971128. You can see the link at the top of every single slide, as well as the code. Next slide. We would like to begin by welcoming everybody to join us and let us know where you're watching from today. So go ahead and log into Menti and tell us what state you are watching from. I see New Mexico, Arizona, Florida, North Dakota's in the house, Virginia, Colorado, California. Thank you for those of you who have entered your location into menti.com. For those of you who are just now logging in, welcome. This is the American Indian College Fund. This is our second evening FAFSA event, and we are welcoming all of our viewers to participate through menti.com. Please feel free to log in on your cell phone or personal device using the code at the top of the slides here. Next slide, Erin. A quick question to start us off. I would like to hear from our attendees today. If you attended our FAFSA event last week, if you were present for our webinar last week, go ahead and put yes into Menti. If this is the first FAFSA event this year, if this is the first FAFSA event that you are attending this year with us, go ahead and click no. And if you are interested in watching the recording, go ahead and click yes. This just gives me a little bit of background information about who's watching today. All right, thank you very much for participating. I will make sure to give us a little recap for last week. So if you did not participate in last week's recording, no worries. We're going to go over that information very shortly here. Next slide, Erin. Again, we are the American Indian College Fund. My name is Sandy Paco. I am the College Readiness Program Administrator at the College Fund, and I would like to greet you with my native greeting. Kanuhwit bisi, uvanga sekinyageksak, uvanga Sandy. I said, hey, what's up? My native name is Sun is Shining. I actually go by Sandy. Sun is Shining for me is more of a personal family nickname. I am Inupiaq. I was born and raised in Anchorage, Alaska, but now live in Oregon and working for the College Fund remotely from home. We also have Erin, Redshirt, and Juan Reese. Would you like to introduce yourself, Erin?
Thank you, Sandy. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Redshirt. I am Sukanju and Ogallala Lakota on my dad's side. I was born and raised in Denver, Colorado, and that's currently where I live right now. Denver, Colorado is where our home office is for the College Fund. I am the program assistant for college access and success here at the College Fund. So I support a lot of programming that goes on in student success services. And I'm excited that you're all here tonight.
All right, next up we have Juan. Juan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Sandy. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you're joining us tonight, and I'm excited to be spending a little bit of time with you this afternoon. My name is Juan, and I am the scholarships manager for the American Indian College Fund. I'm excited to talk to you a little bit about the FAFSA and about the unique scholarship opportunities that the College Fund offers for high school students going to college. We offer every year about $50 million worth of scholarship money. And so I'm really excited to give you some tips and tricks, both regarding the FAFSA and our own scholarship process here at the College Fund.
Thank you, Aaron. Thank you, Juan. All right, Aaron, next slide, please. For everybody viewing tonight, I would like to let you know that we have some excellent prizes to share with you. I'm really excited, especially about our plush new friend, the American Indian College Fund Buffalo. I've got one sitting on my desk here, and he is super soft. We will be raffling off 5 kits tonight to attendees who complete our survey by the end of this webinar. I'm actually going to give you an extra day or two. The survey will be due on Thursday, so that gives you about 2 days to fill out the survey. The 5 winners will get a $25 gift card. They will get one of our plush buffalo. They'll get an American Indian College Fund tote, the Squeeze stress pencil, and we have new this year, an American Indian College Fund bubbler. These bubblers are really neat because they can be used to remind students to stop studying for a little bit and take a short break and stretch, breathe, get some movement in, and then be able to come back to studying kind of refreshed. So I really highly recommend the bubblers. They're pretty fun. All right, next slide. Tonight, we are going to go over kind of the following topics. Why should I, if I were a student, care about the FAFSA? What is it? Why does it matter? What types of financial aid are available to me? What does the FAFSA have to do with each type of financial aid? What are some important things I should know when starting the FAFSA? And what are some frequently asked questions that students and families have when completing the FAFSA? This will be especially the part that Juan gets to go over. And where can I get help if I need further assistance? So these are the questions that we're focusing on tonight's webinar on. So think about the question that really resonates with you the most, and just be paying attention throughout the webinar. I'm sure we're going to hit all of these points. Next slide. For our agenda tonight, we're going to start with a recap. So if you did not attend last week's webinars, no worries. We'll do a quick recap of what we went over. And then we're going to spend the bulk of the time in a special FAFSA panel with Juan. Then we'll have an open Q&A after that, and then we'll close with the survey for prizes. So if you would like to be eligible for the prizes, make sure you stay until the end when we release the survey. We'll also go over College Fund general info and links as well. Next slide. Before we get started on talking about the FAFSA, I just wanted to do a quick check-in and ask everybody, how confident do you feel about feeling the FAFSA right now? Are you not sure? Not very confident? Confident but you have some questions? Or very confident? Go ahead and log into www.menti.com. The code, if you need it, is 55971128. I'll go ahead and put that in the chat to share with everybody again as well. Excellent. I see we have a wide mixture of confidence levels represented tonight. We're going to be supporting you no matter what level you're at. I can see that some people feel very confident. Some people are confident, but they have some questions. Some people are not very confident. That's okay. We're here to help you. And some people are not sure where they are. That's okay. Thank you for checking in with us. All right, next slide. Last week, we went over the different types of financial aid. We actually talked about why consider college, and we looked over some questions that help students and families find their why. And we talked about the value of an education. And then we also talked about ways to explore college and also explore the affordability of college as well. So we talked about the different types of financial aid, including scholarships and grants. We talked about federal work study. We talked about Pell Grants, and we also talked about loans. So one of the things that we went over for each of these things is the importance of knowing whether you need to pay it back. If you remember from last week, if you were here, we said for scholarships and grants, you don't typically have to pay those back. but you may have requirements to fulfill different scholarship requirements that the scholarship funders are asking you to fulfill. Work study, no, it is earn as you work. And then the Pell Grant, no, you do not have to pay those back. Loans, yes, you do, with interest and fees. So this was one of the big important things we went over last week. And if we go to the next slide, we'll take a look at also what each of these items has to do with the FAFSA. The scholarships and grants, if you want to be eligible for them, it's recommended that you apply for FAFSA. Some scholarships require FAFSA, others do not. So it's best to check the scholarship that you're interested in and look at the requirements before applying and make sure that you're hitting all of those checklist items for that scholarship. For work study, yes, you do need to apply for the FAFSA to be considered for federal work study. And then after that, you would go on to apply for a campus job and go through the whole job interview process and whatnot at the school that you're interested in. For Pell Grants, yes, you do need to apply for the FAFSA. I actually didn't know that Pell Grants were awarded when I went to school. And the very first time I applied for FAFSA, I found out that very year that I was awarded a Pell Grant. I was super excited. That's money that I don't have to pay back. It's not a loan, and it's almost like getting a scholarship, and it was just completely unexpected. I was just super excited about how much more affordable that first year was for me. And then I went on to get Pell Grants a couple of times over the years after. So applying for FAFSA is always a good idea. You never know if you're going to get a Pell Grant or not. They do recommend that you generally apply early. FAFSA just opened up a few days ago. October 1st every year is when the FAFSA opens up. So I encourage you, if you haven't done so yet, to apply for FAFSA. Loans, you're going to need to apply for FAFSA for those as well. And then loans will have additional requirements such as loan counseling. So whoever the lenders that you are working with, your school will help you with looking at what your loan availability is, but it starts really with FAFSA. So FAFSA is going to determine what you're eligible for. So yes, you do need to apply for FAFSA for these things. Next slide. If you remember from last time, or if you haven't seen it this time, I'm going to let you know, the FAFSA stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. It's free. It opens October 1st, as I said, and in order to complete the FAFSA, you'll want to go to studentaid.gov or download the My Student Aid app. Next slide. Quick brief reminders from last week, or if you're new this time, this is what the application looks like when you go to studentaid.gov. I actually have the direct link here. We will be sharing all of the links with all of the attendees in a follow-up email after. So studentaid.gov /aid/apply for aid/FAFSA. If you go to the studentaid.gov website, you're going to get a different page that looks like that. That's okay. If you go up to the little bars on the top, one of the very first one is FAFSA, FAFSA click-through. So you can click to that. So if you can't remember this whole link, if you can just remember studentaid.gov, that'll get you to where you need to be. So you can find the FAFSA click-through link on the very top of their page there. All right, next slide. Once you click through that link, you're going to select who you are. If you're a student and you are applying for the FAFSA, if you're a parent or guardian filling out the FAFSA, or if you're a preparer helping a student fill out the FAFSA. So this will be the next question that you see there. Next slide. After that, you will need to create a FSA ID. So the FSA ID is something, if you haven't done this before, you'll need to create it for the first time. If you've done the FAFSA, you should still have your FSA ID, hopefully from the years past. to save. We actually have a slide coming up on that, so I'm going to touch on that in just a moment. But if you are new, I just wanted to make sure that you knew to take the time to create an Fsa Id. It's kind of like your password or passcode for getting into the application year after year. Next slide. So students and guardians are going to need their own Fsa Id. You're only going to need to create an Fsa Id for one of your parents or guardians. Make sure to write down your ID and your password in a secure place and save it. You're going to use these credentials every single year to renew your Fafsa. Just make sure you save your Fsa Id and your guardian saves their Fsa Id as well. Next slide. Part of preparing for the Fafsa is having all of the documents together. I recommend that you start gathering all of these things before you actually start filling out the Fafsa. So you're going to sign up for that username and password, the Fsa Id. Make sure that you have your social security number with you. You're going to need your 2021 tax records and information. One of the nice things about Fafsa now is that they can automatically transfer tax info with the IRS data retrieval tool. So you'll just need a little bit of information. It'll ask you for a couple questions to transfer your taxes. You'll also need records of any untaxed income that you have, records of your assets. Assets is money. Money like you have in a savings account or a banking account, and also a list of schools that you're interested in. Next slide. Once you have all of these things, you are ready to log in and complete your application. It takes between 20 and 30 minutes. If you get stuck with any of the questions on that application, please use the Fafsa Helpline. Their number we have here. We'll share these slides out with you at the end of the day, but you can also find it on their website. Don't forget to review the information when you get down to the bottom of your application to ensure there's accuracy. Do not forget to provide your signature and your guardian's signature. Also using the Fsa Id. Don't forget to submit your application. And then at the end, you'll know you've submitted your application if you've reached the confirmation page. So there will be a page that says, congratulations, you've applied, and it'll have your name on that. Next slide. Just a few quick things to keep in mind. As we've said before, keep your Fsa ID somewhere safe. Check your email often for updates from studentaid.gov. Don't forget to renew your Fafsa every year. It's not a one and done thing. You need to renew every single year that you're interested in any of the financial aid options that I talked about at the beginning. So grants, scholarships, loans, Pell Grants, all of those. You're going to want to reapply every single year in October. Please remember to contact the financial aid office at the colleges you've applied for. If you have any questions about financial aid letters, they are your best reference. And don't forget to pay attention to deadlines at your school. Next slide. And then a couple of important terms to know. EFC is expected family contribution. That is determined by Fafsa, and schools will use this to determine aid. I'm going to leave it kind of at that because Juan may touch on some of those things in a little bit here. And then cost of attendance is the other. The cost of attendance is all of the costs that are included in going to college: tuition and fees, room and board, books, supplies, transportation, study abroad, miscellaneous expenses, all of that. So just some terms to know. Next slide. This is where we get to stop and have an actual more in-depth conversation about the Fafsa process. If you missed last week's recording, no worries. I'm actually going to send you a copy of that recording as a follow-up email after this event, so you can go back and revisit that if you would like to. But I'd like to take the rest of this hour to talk with Juan about Fafsa. All right, Aaron, you can go ahead and stop sharing.
Thanks so much, Sandy. So I'm really excited to dive into this. Before we get into our questions, I wanted to share with folks that prior to coming on board with the College Fund, I was a financial aid officer for 2 years at a public university in California. And I am also the first person in my family to go to college. So when I was in high school going through all of this all just sounded super strange and super scary. And it just seems like legal forms that I wasn't sure how to fill out. So I'm excited that you're here. I know that you're not navigating this process by yourself. There is support for questions. We are one of those resources to the College Fund, and I'm hoping that by the end of today, I will be able to point you to different resources that you can go to for help to complete the application with FAFSA.
Thank you, Juan. I was actually going to ask you about your background to have you share a little bit. So I'm really grateful that you were able to share right at the beginning there. I have a couple of questions for you that I'd like to ask you that are kind of like the most frequently asked questions that we found from students and parents. So we can spend a few minutes on these questions, and then we can spend a little bit of time after that, after the panel, on a Q&A, if that sounds good to you.
Absolutely, that sounds great.
The very first question that I have for you is, what is the difference between the FAFSA, financial aid, and scholarships? I know I touched on that a little bit, but we'd love to hear you kind of delve into the difference between them. Again, what is the difference between the FAFSA, financial aid, and scholarships?
Oh, that's a really good question. So the FAFSA is an application to access financial aid from the federal and the state government at your institution. So oftentimes when I worked in financial aid, people would refer to their financial aid as my FAFSA money. So just understand that FAFSA is simply an application that you complete online to be considered for different types of aid. Now, financial aid are any economic resources that you receive from the institution or a private provider, like the American Indian College Fund, and those funds are used to cover your educational expenses. So financial aid is comprised of things like loans, which is money that you have to pay back, grants, which is money that you do not have to pay back, scholarships, which is also money that you don't have to pay back, but like Sandy said, you might have engagement responsibilities for the provider or the donor. Federal work study, which you have to get a job on campus and you earn that money as you work. So that is financial aid, right? So it's any economic resource that you have access to that is used to pay for your educational expenses. And when they say educational expenses, that definition is really pretty broad. It means tuition and fees, books and supplies, room and board, living expenses, all of those things. And lastly is scholarships. So scholarships is a type of financial aid, but it is different than, say, for example, a grant, because grants typically are provided by the federal government with a Pell Grant or by the state. So like in California, some students get the Cal Grant. That is free money, quote unquote, right, that the student receives. It doesn't need to be paid back. But a scholarship, on the other hand, requires that the student takes additional action steps to apply for them. So oftentimes, the FAFSA may or may not be a requirement for scholarships, but 9 times out of 10, a scholarship requires you to submit an additional application other than the FAFSA, right? So for example, here at the American Indian College Fund, we are a scholarship provider. And so in order to be considered for our scholarship opportunities, the students have to go on our website, on our portal, and they have to complete our scholarship application. I'm gonna go into that in more detail later on. But that's a really good question, because oftentimes people get that federal aid or that state aid with scholarships, because really, as a student, any money that comes to you that helps you pay for school, you consider it as financial aid. And so to some degree that's true, but just understand that if you are looking for scholarships, which I think you definitely should, that is going to require that you complete an additional application process or form to be considered. And oftentimes that federal and state aid that you receive by completing the FAFSA can be stacked with any scholarships that you get. So for those folks that are thinking about going to college and minimizing that debt by the time that they graduate, one of the most impactful ways to minimize that debt, number one, is thinking about affordability when you're choosing a school to go to. And then number two is putting in the time and the work and the effort to you always complete the FAFSA, and you always apply for scholarships. You look for scholarships that are tailored to who you are, right? So there's different scholarships for different kinds of majors and different kinds of students. So you apply for both because, like I said, the money can be stacked. So good question, Sandy.
I really like how you put that one. I like thinking about FAFSA as being only kind of like the first step in the journey of discovering what is available to you and what the opportunities are, and it kind of opens doors, but the financial aid journey really doesn't stop with that application. It really is only just the first part of the step. And financial aid could be a wide variety of different things. And it's also great to think about financial aid as being a mixture of different scholarships, different types of aid that you can use, like loans and Pell Grants and whatnot, that you're going to stack on top of each other. I think that was a really great visual for me to understand financial aid. Thank you very much for helping us with that. My next question is, what is the difference between grants, loans, and scholarships? Kind of similar questions, but we're now talking a little bit about grants, loans, and scholarships.
Totally, yeah. So let's tackle loans first, because I think that's something that people can grasp almost immediately. A loan is debt, right? And so it's money that you say to the government, if you lend me this money for me to go to school, I promise that I'll pay back. I'll pay it back. You might have heard recently that there was some loan forgiveness passed by our current administration. And that's great for the people that are able to take advantage of that. I say that because who knows if that's ever going to happen again. So, just keep that in mind, that if you sign up for a loan right now, you should understand that that is money that you are promising to the government to pay back, and you cannot bankrupt on it. And who knows if they're ever going to do forgiveness again. So just keep that in mind, because it is debt and you do have to pay it back. And loans have interest. And so interest is money that gets tacked to the amount of the loan that you borrow, and it grows over time, right? So let's say, for example, that you borrow $10,000 and every year that accrues $100 interest. And so, every year that at the end of year one, you're going to owe $10,100, year two, $10,200, and so forth. So you want to be mindful of that. But in essence, a loan is debt. It's money that you have to pay back. Grants are defined as, people call it free money. And that's one way to understanding. I like to think of it as money that you don't have to pay back, because that's really not necessarily free money. It's money that is coming from taxpayers. So, nothing comes from nowhere. But it's money that if you qualify, you don't have to pay back. And oftentimes, the qualification that you need to meet to get a grant is that you have to demonstrate need based on the FAFSA information that you provide. So you talked about the EFC, right? Just a little bit ago. And so the EFC is the expected family contribution. When you complete the FAFSA, the computer of the application calculates how much your family is expected to contribute to your college education based on their income, which is reported on their taxes. And if you have an EFC of 0, that means that you demonstrate the highest need for financial aid. And so students with an EFC of 0, for example, qualify for the Pell Grant. The Pell Grant is money that you don't have to pay back. It's a type of grant provided by the federal government. So the federal government offers some of those grants. Some states also offer some grants, like California, they offer the Pell Grant. So you don't have to go applying for each of those grants. You have to complete the FAFSA, and then depending on the state that you live in and the school that you attend, and your overall eligibility, which is determined by the FAFSA itself, you may or may not be awarded a grant. I sometimes work with students who say, well, my parents just make too much money, and I'm not going to bother to complete the FAFSA. And, I understand that. And my recommendation is always to apply and complete the FAFSA, because you don't know what your parents' financial situation is going to be as the year moves along. And if there are changes in your family's economic circumstances, you can work with the financial office at your school to get the FAFSA revised. If you apply for a scholarship that requires FAFSA information, you may not be eligible. So even if you believe that your family makes too much money to qualify for federal or state financial aid, my recommendation is that you'll always take the time and complete the FAFSA. It's about an hour, no harm, no foul if you're not eligible. And lastly, scholarships. So again, that is money that you don't have to pay back. It does require that you complete an additional application for each scholarship provider. And so there are many different scholarship providers out there. Here in the US, we have a couple of different scholarship providers for American Indian and Alaska Native students. The College Fund, we're one of them. The Cobell Scholarship is another one. ACES is another one. And even though we support the same kind of students, so the same demographic of student, and we might sound like we are partners with each other, and we are, but we don't award the same type of scholarships, right? And so to apply for the College Fund and for Cobell, those are two different applications that you have to submit. And they're all independently run operations. So you might receive a scholarship from both. You might receive a scholarship from one and not the other. So my recommendation to folks, especially if you're in high school right now, this is the best time to start looking for scholarships, because the scholarship applications for the fall 23 semester is going to be opening at some point this fall and throughout next spring semester. So what my homework to you guys would be start doing that research and start writing down scholarship opportunities that you're eligible for and understand the criteria. Some scholarships are only for some different kinds of majors, different kinds of students. Some scholarships have a gender component to them. So they're all different, right? So understand that it's going to take you time to look for those. And you definitely want to put together a strong application package so that you will have the highest chance to be awarded. Because like I said, federal and state financial aid and scholarships, they can all be stacked, right? So if you receive a scholarship and you are Pell eligible, you can receive both the grant and the scholarship or scholarships with an S. If you receive multiple, I mean, that's how you can go to school for free.
Thank you again for bringing it back to how we can stack different types of financial aid. I think that was an important learning for me when I was in school. The first couple of times that I did the FAFSA, kind of struggled with it. I didn't necessarily apply for scholarships, but as I got older, even I was like a college, maybe junior or senior when I started looking for scholarships, it really opened up that world for me. And having the application done, even though I hadn't been applying in the previous years, I had a couple of scholarships come through where a professor said, I think you're the right person for this. I think you've got a good shot. You should apply for it. And then I looked and one of the first requirements was you have to have the FAFSA. And I was just like, oh man, I'm so glad I did that. So good. It's really good to just think about the FAFSA as the first step of that journey again. So a little bit more about the FAFSA. What if a student lives with a guardian other than a parent? Who signs, or what does that look like?
Oh, that's a good question. And honestly, it depends. Because different people have different circumstances in their life, right? So let's say that you are a foster youth, you're in the foster care system. The FAFSA has a process to override your dependency, meaning because you are in foster care, you don't have access to your parents' information. And so there's a way for the FAFSA to kind of circumnavigate the parent financial information and only take into account that of you as a student. So that's an example of that. If you happen to live with a family member and you're still in contact with your biological parent, then you want to contact your biological parent. They would have to set up an account, a FAFSA account. Only one of your two biological parents has to set up a FAFSA account, provide their tax income information. And when you reach the end of the application, electronically, you and one of your two parents has to provide an electronic signature for the FAFSA to be validated and go through. So that's another kind of circumstance. The FAFSA looks at the biological parent, right? So if you were adopted and that has been finalized, the FAFSA might look at that. So it all really depends. My best recommendation is that if you have a special circumstance where you don't have immediate access to your biological parents, or if connecting with your biological parent would impose harm on you, my recommendation is that you contact FAFSA and they can walk you through the dependency override process. FAFSA has a phone line where a human being will pick up the phone and they can help you with your questions. Get something to write with. I'm going to give you that number. I believe that number is also included in this presentation, but I want to give it to you right now in case you need it. Or really, if you have any questions outside of the dependency question, they can help you with really anything related to the application. So that phone number, if you're ready, that's 1-800-433-3243. Again, that's 1-800-433-3243. Thank you for putting that on the chat, Cindy. So, that's a really good question. And it just always depends because everybody has different circumstances. It's really hard to make an assessment or a recommendation that covers most folks. But in essence, you want to think about this. Do you have access to your biological parent? Yes or no? And if the answer is yes, then you will have to provide their information. If the answer is no, contact FAFSA to see if you should pursue a dependency override if you qualify for that. And if you have access to your biological parent, think about if contacting them, if you don't have immediate access to them, if you don't live with them, if contacting them would cause you harm, and FAFSA can also help you with that. But just know that there is a way for you to not have to provide your parents' information if connecting with your parents causes harm on you.
Thank you for clarifying. There was another question that I have been asked by a number of parents and families. It's basically about taxes. What should students know if they don't have tax information for their parents?
That's a good question. So a couple of things. The FAFSA will allow you to estimate your parents' income. So when you sit down and complete the FAFSA, my recommendation is always have your parent next to you, right? Because they understand their financials better than you do. So even if they don't have their taxes ready when you complete the FAFSA, they can just kind of ballpark their earnings for the year and you can input that information. At this point, it is really important that you submit the FAFSA, even if you don't have the most current tax information ready. When you submit the FAFSA, you can always go back into the application and update it once you receive your parents' financial information. Even if you're not able to update it, the financial advisor at the school that you end up going to might reach out to you and say, hey, it looks like we received your FAFSA, but in order for us to finish processing it, we need you to submit these different tax records for either you or your parent. And so at that point, you can provide that information. The reason why I say that it's really important to complete the FAFSA now and as soon as possible, get it submitted, is because the application, when you submit it, gets date stamped. And so some types of aid are very limited. So for example, in the state of California, the Call Grant, which is determined based on FAFSA information, they have a cutoff deadline of March 1st. So that means that any FAFSA applications that get submitted after March 1st may not be eligible for the Call Grant, even if you meet the income criteria. Another example of a financial resource that is very limited is work study. Typically, there are more work study eligible students at schools than they have money to fund. And so they look at, okay, who submitted the FAFSA first, and they award folks from the top of the list down, right? So make sure that you get that FAFSA submitted as soon as you can. When you are working on the FAFSA, there is a tool that allows you, if you have filed taxes in 2021, or your parents, if they filed taxes in 2021, to retrieve your tax information from the IRS. It's called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool. And so you have to input your parents' full name and their socials, the address that is displayed on their tax returns, the 1040 forms. And so then the computer connects to the IRS server and it retrieves that information and pulls it right into your application. There may also be a scenario where your parent doesn't make enough money to file taxes, right? And so the FAFSA can also kind of walk you through that process of like, okay, let's say my parent was unemployed for most of last year and they only made, I don't know, say $2,000, which is below the threshold of what one is required to make to file taxes. The FAFSA may have a way to not request all of that information to be inputted into the system. Once again, just like the previous question, it all depends because everyone's financial situation is different. So my recommendation is that if you are struggling with the tax portion of the FAFSA, which quite frankly, completely understandable because there's a lot of information in there that looks foreign to most folks, call the Fafsa Helpline. They can help you understand your own family's financial situation and what needs to be reported on the FAFSA.
A follow-up question that I would like to ask you on this topic, as we're talking about on the need for parents' information. Do all students need to have parents' information? What about our older viewers here who may be going to school at a later time in life? For example, I live with my husband. He's actually going to school here in Oregon right now. Mm-hmm. So would he still need his parents' information, or what does that look like?
Yeah, no, there is an age, I think it's 23, where the student no longer is considered a dependent. 23 or 25, I forget what the age is, but it's somewhere between in the neighborhood of 23 to 25, where you are no longer considered a dependent. Now, oftentimes when I work with students below that age, someone who's 19 and out of the house, they say, hey, I don't depend on my parents. They don't claim me on their taxes, right? Dependency for FAFSA and dependency for tax purposes, even though it's the same term and the same language, are two different things. So for FAFSA purposes, you're going to be considered a dependent. If you are under that age that I'm unsure of, whether that's 23 or 25, whatever that age may be, you're going to be considered a dependent. If you're below that age, another way to override that dependency status is if you are married. So if you're 18, 19 and you're married, then you're no longer considered dependent for FAFSA purposes. Or if you qualify for one of these special circumstances, which we were just talking about. So if you are 16, 17 in foster care, you won't be considered a dependent for FAFSA purposes. But just keep in mind that dependency for FAFSA and taxes are two different things. And if you're 18 and your parents don't claim it in your taxes, unless you meet one of those special criteria that I just mentioned, you are going to be considered a dependent student and you're going to have to provide your parents financial information unless you qualify for this one, for one of those special circumstances that I talked about. So, as you're seeing, the granulars of all of this always depends on the specific situation and circumstances of one's life. So my best recommendation is that if you have any of those granular situations, contact FAFSA, because the answer really is going to depend on your circumstances.
I think it's also worth saying that when you're filling out the application too, a lot of the questions will have a little question bubble that you can take your mouse and hover over, and it'll kind of explain what those terms are and what the conditions are. So that's really helpful for me, helping my husband fill out the FAFSA as well. Is there a maximum income cutoff to fill out the FAFSA?
That's a good question. There isn't. So when you complete the application, regardless of how much income you and your parents make, the application can still be submitted and processed. Now, there are different incomes for different types of aid, and those really honestly vary depending on not just the amount of income that your family makes, but also the size of your household, right? So when you look at the FAFSA, it is really kind of like a math formula. So it looks at how much money you and your parents make and how many people depend on that income or the size of your household is, among other things. So in short, no, there isn't an income threshold. You can submit, and you should submit the application regardless of how much money you and your parents make. Even if you think that you make too much money to be considered for federal or state financial aid, be sure to submit the application, because you don't know if you need a loan. You might, even if you don't want to take one. Things happen. I work with students all the time who got I worked with somebody once who was in soccer practice and had a really terrible injury. Their family wasn't able to help them out. They had to pull up a little bit of loan money to help them through that experience. And without the FAFSA on the file, you still won't be able to even offer you a loan should you need it. So it's always nice to have just that resource. Even if you don't take it, it's nice to have it available. And some scholarships might also require that you have the FAFSA on file, and we provide FAFSA information to determine your eligibility. So always submit your FAFSA, even if you don't think that you're going to be eligible for much.
That reminds me of that scholarship that professor said, like, oh, I think you're the right person for this. This just came up and you should apply for it. I wasn't planning on applying. I didn't even know the scholarship was available until well into the school year. And then when I looked at the application requirements, I saw FAFSA was required. And I was like, oh, yes, I've done that. So that's another good reminder that you never know what the opportunities are that might come up through your school year. So it's just a great idea to apply. What happens after students and families submit the FAFSA? What does that look like?
That's a good question. So you immediately, right after you click on submit, almost instantaneously, you're going to receive a confirmation email. If you submit the FAFSA and within a couple of hours you haven't received that confirmation email, go back into the application and make sure that the data that you provide is okay. Sometimes you can say at gmail.com instead of .com. And that's going to prevent you from getting that confirmation email. You can always go back and make revisions to the FAFSA after you submit it. So the very first thing that you should be keeping an eye out for is that confirmation email, because that lets you know, okay, my FAFSA was submitted and it went in and it got time stamped and date stamped like it should. So that's number one. Number two is, it is not uncommon so the FAFSA allows you to add up to 10 schools that you're considering attending. So I know that when you're in high school or when you're applying for college, you always have that top A, that's the school that you really want to go to. And then you have your option B and C and D and so forth. Add them all, because if you don't add them to the FAFSA, that means that all those schools won't be able to get your FAFSA file, and they won't be able to make a determination of your eligibility. Your eligibility for every school is going to be different. So make sure to add all of the schools. If you happen to forget a school after you submit the application, you can always go back, add the school in the school selection section, resubmit the FAFSA so that change is saved, give it a couple of weeks, and then your school should receive your file. In the springtime, financial aid offices across the United States began creating financial aid award packages. And so in the financial aid award package, you're going to receive a couple of different really important data points. The first one is your financial aid eligibility from the school. And so they're going to tell you, hey, based on the FAFSA, you qualify for these different grants and loans, and maybe even some scholarships that they have at their institution that don't require an additional application. Every school is different, right? And so it's really important that you are kind of keeping tabs of all the schools that you apply to and that you're expecting to receive an award package from. Because if you don't get one by, let's say, the end of March, you might want to pick up the phone and call that financial aid office and say, hey, I'm Juan and I am an applicant for the fall 23, and I submitted my FAFSA and I'm still waiting to receive my award package. It may be that it's in process, or it may be that something else happened. Before that award package gets created, the financial aid office at your school or schools may reach out to you and say, hey, we need some additional information to finish processing your FAFSA, right? So you recall earlier how I said that if you are not sure about your parents' 2021 income information, you can guesstimate and submit it just so it gets submitted. Well, come springtime, financial aid offices might reach out to you and say, hey, we need some additional information to confirm that guesstimate that you provided on the FAFSA so that we can award you aid accurately. That process is called verification. And if you are selected for verification, be sure to take action immediately. likely you won't be offered a financial aid award package until you have submitted all of the items that the financial aid office is requesting. So it is really important that you keep tabs on your email and that you check it at least once a week, if not more frequently, because that is how all of those communications from your potential schools, that's how they're going to be communicating to you. One more thing I want to add is that once you get those award packages, in addition to highlighting how much they are awarding you, they're also going to include how much it costs to attend, right? So you might see that to attend, school A, it might cost you $20,000, and that is comprised of tuition and fees, books and supplies, living expenses. 1 year, everything added up costs $20,000, and all of the aid that you're getting, $15,000. So there's going to be a bit of a gap there of $5,000 that you have to think about how you're going to meet it. Are you going to work while you're going to school? Do you have savings? Is there anything else that you're going to utilize to meet that gap? So that's something that you want to think about. Secondly, I think it's a really nice plan and idea to compare financial aid packages for all of the different schools that you receive award packages from. So that way you can say, okay, school A offered me this much and it costs this much. And school B, on the other hand, offered me a different amount and it costs a different amount to attend. Is my gap going to be more or less, or there won't be a gap at all? Because that can really help you decide where you're going to attend school, right? So really think about that affordability piece. In addition to, all the other things that you're thinking about: college, location, campus life, all of those different things, but definitely think about the finances. And if all of that gets out of hand, and if you feel overwhelmed, don't go through any of that experience by yourself. Call the financial aid office at the school that you have questions for. And there's people in that team, the financial aid team, who are qualified and trained and excited to connect with you to answer all of those questions.
Thank you. I think that actually recaps the last question that I had for you, which is what should students and families do if they get stuck or they're confused or they need help. So if you wanted to just give like a quick recap again to remind our students and families what they can do and what their resources are if they get stuck while filling out the FAFSA, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, number one is call the FAFSA customer service line. So once again, that is 1-800-433-3243. That's number one. And number two is, if you have questions about even the FAFSA itself before you submit it or after it's been submitted, and you have questions about your financial aid eligibility at the different schools that you're going to attend, go to Google and look up the name of your school plus financial aid office. You're going to find their phone number, call them up, and the people, every team, every campus has staff that are really excited to connect with you. So if you are planning on going to Colorado State here in Colorado State Financial Aid Office, Google that, you're going to get their number, give them a call, and they can help you answer any questions that you have about your aid eligibility or even completing the FAFSA at their school.
Thank you very much, Juan. That was very helpful. We have time for a couple of questions. Erin, if you wanted to share our screen again with Menti, we can have our attendees here. If you have any questions, you can log into Menti and submit them, or you can even submit them through the Q&A here as well. So we'll be monitoring both, and maybe Juan, you can just pick like one or two of the questions that are kind of like some of the most commonly asked questions.
That sounds good.
Should be the next slide. There we go. So if you have a question that you would like to submit to Juan, go to www.menti.com. You can use the code 55971128 to submit your question. You can also use our Q&A chat just here in the webinar as well. We'll give everybody a moment to log in and see what questions you might have.
Well, that's a good question. So let me start by tackling the fellowship. A fellowship is similar to a scholarship opportunity. So submitting the FAFSA is not going to qualify you for a fellowship. A fellowship requires that you go and you seek out that experience and that you apply for it. And if you get a fellowship, that may come in return with funds to go to school, but also with engagement responsibilities to the donor. So just know that you have to seek those out independently. Let's see, if I'm in the last year of college, I still have to fill out the 23-24 FAFSA. It depends. If you are going to be graduating in the spring of 2023, and you don't plan to return to school in the fall of 23, then you don't. But if you might return in the fall of 2023, then you do have to submit the FAFSA. Either return to complete a couple of classes to get your degree, or if you want to move on to a graduate program, there is also financial aid for graduate school.
Do you want to pick one or two more questions from here, Juan?
That sounds good. Let me pick this other question about tribes who give scholarships to students use the FAFSA. So, every tribe is different. And there are tribes where the tribe has unique funding for students that are enrolled members or descendants of that tribe to go to school. From my experience, when I worked in financial aid in California, most tribes did require the student completed the FAFSA to be considered for those unique funding opportunities that the tribe offered. So like I said, my recommendation is that by default, if you're going to college, every year you should file the FAFSA, just to eliminate the potential of not being considered for something there. Would I still be eligible for scholarships of work study if I don't receive the Pell Grant, or if my EFC is at the max limit? So maybe for scholarships, maybe not for work study. So if your EFC is too high for the Pell Grant, you are likely not going to qualify for work study. But scholarships, there is two different kinds of scholarships, and I think this is going to be a good segue for our next section, Sandy. There are need-based scholarships and merit-based scholarships. Need-based are those where you have to demonstrate having financial need based on the information that you provide on the FAFSA. Merit-based, on the other hand, don't take into account FAFSA at all. We are one of those providers here that we don't look at your FAFSA information to see if you are eligible or not. We look at your merit. So we look at your GPA, and our application process is also comprised of a couple of reflection questions. So why don't we start transitioning onto that piece? Because I do want to take a minute to let you all know about the unique opportunities that we have for the next academic year. So like I said before, the FAFSA is not the same as a scholarship application. You need to apply for scholarships independently in addition to filing the FAFSA. Here at the College Fund, we offer different scholarship opportunities. So let's go to the next slide and I can talk about those. So at the College Fund, we offer a variety of different scholarships, and they're all housed under this program called the Full Circle Scholarship Program. The application for the fall 2023 and the spring 2024 is going to open on February 1st of next year. The application takes on average about an hour to complete. This past year, in 2021-2022, we awarded close to $12 million in scholarship money. In the current academic year that we are on, our budget grew to about $50 million. We awarded well over 30 to 100 students throughout the United States, going to over 250 different schools. And we funded students pursuing vocational degrees, bachelor's. Even if you are pursuing advanced degrees, we also offer opportunities for you. In order to be eligible, you need to plan to be enrolled. You have to plan to be enrolled full-time in the fall of 2023. You have to be attending a not-for-profit accredited school. You have to have a minimum GPA, cumulative GPA of 2.0, and you have to be an enrolled member or an enrolled tribal member or a descendant of one. And please be sure to file your application with us by May 31st. Once again, that is going to open on February 1st, and you have to file by May 31st. I encourage you to go to that link to collegefund.org/scholarships to learn more about our application experience and process, because you will have to craft some reflection questions to apply.
Thank you very much, Juan. I went ahead and put our website in the chat to send out to everybody. I will also include the links for everything in a follow-up email after this event. Next slide, Erin. All right, I wanted to do another check-in with our viewers and ask them if they're feeling any more confident now after hearing us talk about FAFSA. So go ahead and go to menti.com and let us know how you're feeling. Are you not sure? Are you not very confident? Are you confident but you still have questions? That's okay. That's a normal part of the process. Remember, Juan mentioned that you can call the Fafsa helpline if you have any questions that we weren't able to get to today, and they will help you out with that. Or are you feeling very confident? Oh, I like seeing those numbers.
Definitely. Yeah, one of the questions that I wanted to address that I didn't have a chance to is about those students who have parents who are divorced or separated. Call FAFSA. They can help you understand whose parent information you want to report, because that's a very common question and it can depend. So I don't want to misguide anybody. So be sure to call FAFSA. Again, that number is 1-800-433-3243.
And if you can't remember that number, feel free to go to that studentaid.gov website. I did see a question that was like, well, there's so many different FAFSA websites. I would go to the studentaid.gov website. It should have a .gov on it. That is the actual official FAFSA page. Everything else might be related to or help guides or whatnot, but we recommend going to studentaid.gov. We will include all of these links in our follow-up email as well. Just wanted to emphasize that since I saw that question as well. All right, next slide. We have recordings for you to share. We're actually going to share the first recording if you were not able to attend our general FAFSA information last week. We had a session on September 29th, so we'll share that recording. We will be sharing today's recording as well in a follow-up email. And then we want to talk about prizes. So Erin, if you can go to the next slide. Oh, I guess it's the one after this, but we can stay here. We can actually stay there, Erin. In addition to looking at those recordings, if you need more help, we actually did a whole step-by-step walkthrough with Juan last year where we looked at the application. We looked at each question in the application and did one as if we were filling out the FAFSA. We have that on our YouTube page. So if you go to the American Indian College Fund's YouTube, then you can find our FAFSA Help Night from last year. I've included a tiny URL. Here's the link. We'll go ahead and share that link at the end of the presentation. We'll even make sure to include this link in a follow-up too. So I highly recommend that. As a wonderful resource, in addition to all of the things that Juan has already mentioned. Next slide. Some other things that we offer throughout the year include we have the Tribal Colleges and University Fair. We do FAFSA. We have other FAFSA events we'll be doing throughout the year. We have coaches chats. We have a lot of programming that we do throughout the year. The best way to follow all of our opportunities is to go to the collegefund.org website. On the very bottom of the website, you'll see this little box that says get updates and news. You can put your first and last name and email address in there, and we will begin providing regular updates about our scholarship offerings, other FAFSA webinars that we have throughout the year, all of the programming that we offer that's free for you to join. We love seeing return students and families, so we look forward to seeing you throughout this year. Next slide. Here it is. All right, here's the survey for tonight. If you have stayed until the end, we're super proud of you for joining us to really get that in-depth FAFSA knowledge. We would like to ask you how this event was. So go ahead and fill out the survey by Thursday to be considered for our prizes. Everything that you see in the picture here, so our brand new College Fund friend, the plush buffalo, the tote bag, a $25 Amex card, and the other items will be raffled off. So Friday, I'm going to be giving the follow-up email with all of the links. This whole presentation will be included. The recording link for this presentation will be included, and we will do an announcement of who won the prizes. We have 5 of these kits to draw from. So if you want to be a part of the drawing, make sure you get that survey done by Thursday. Next slide. Here's the link page that I will be providing to you. So you'll see that the studentaid.gov website is provided there. Our College Fund website is provided there, our scholarship page, and then both of our recordings, the recording from last week, the recording from this week, when that is uploaded onto our YouTube will be included. And our FAFSA walkthrough from last year that goes through the FAFSA step-by-step, every question. And then we just want to let you know that upcoming in November, dates are still to be decided. We're going to have a Tribal Colleges and Universities Fair. So if you're a student who's interested in going to potentially a tribal college or university, we advise you to check this out. This fair will be an opportunity to meet with many of the tribal colleges that the College Fund works with. They'll be talking about their schools, their programs, what degrees are offered, some of the cool things that make their university really unique. So we will reach out to everybody that is in our registered Zoom session today and let you know when that's upcoming. Next slide. On behalf of the American Indian College Fund, I would like to thank everybody for attending tonight. Make sure you follow us on social media. We are on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. If you check us out, our handle is @NativePathways. That's yet another way to follow us and learn about our events for next year. All right. Thank you very much, Juan. I just wanted to close out with a koyana. Thank you for joining us and sharing your FAFSA knowledge and your knowledge of financial aid in general.
My pleasure. It was a great hanging out with all of you tonight.